Helmut Marko has sent a worrying update when it comes to Verstappen's future in the sport, believing that the three-time world champion isn't bluffing when he says that he could retire earlier than anticipated due to different situations, making his life in the sport very difficult. Obviously, the latest one was the swearing scandal from the FIA, and while Ben Sulayem said that he respects Verstappen as an individual, he also handed him a community service penalty that neither he or the governing body understand what it is. But after Marko's latest comments, could we actually see Verstappen retiring earlier than anticipated? And if so, how will this affect the sport in general? It goes without saying that Max Verstappen is one of the most outspoken drivers on the grid, and the fact that he never accepted the latest incident between him and the FIA easily goes to show that he's nearing retirement much earlier than anticipated. At the age of 27, he already has 10 years of experience in this sport and 3 championships, which could well turn into 4 this year. And obviously the situation is very difficult to comprehend right now, because Verstappen has threatened to retire earlier than what many would think, even before the incident with the FIA. When talking about this, the 3-time world champion said, "I'm at the stage of my career where I don't want to be dealing with this all the time. It's really tiring. Of course, it's great to have success and win races, but once you have accomplished all that, winning championships and races, then you want to have a good time as well. If you have to deal with all these kinds of silly things, for me, that is not a way of continuing in the sport, that is for sure." The answer from Ben Sulayem was that the F1 drivers are not rappers and they shouldn't use the F word every minute, which Hamilton found to have a bit of a racial note because the majority of the rappers are black, further putting the president of the FIA in a more difficult spot to defend himself against the raging attacks from the Formula 1 drivers. Be that as it may, we are now seeing a situation in which the rules of the FIA are putting a lot of pressure on the drivers that could force them into early retirement, as one of the primary things was the fact that the calendar keeps growing and might reach a season in which we'll visit 26 races in 1 year. For drivers like Alonso, Hamilton and Perez, this is already too much, but for example, Hamilton and Alonso are already in the years in which retirement is closer than it was a couple of years ago, whereas for Verstappen, you could note that he's in his prime, winning races and championships, so to give up now would be a bit of a crazy move from his side, at least from our point of view. But if he does, and Helmut Marko believes that there are no bluffs included in his statements, then the sport will find itself in a very difficult situation, because they'll have to justify how their rules have gone on to dictate a 3-time world champion and one of the most talented drivers out of the competition much sooner than it should have been. When talking about the statements of Verstappen, Helmut Marko said, "You have to take Max seriously. He has achieved a great deal, but it is important to him that he also enjoys the whole sport. If that is increasingly spoiled for him, then he is of a character that when he says, okay, that's it, then that's it. He means it seriously, but I hope that the current situation won't really cause him to retire soon." The anger that Verstappen is feeling towards the penalty of the FIA can be easily justified if we're to look at how Günther Steiner made a figure of himself by constantly using the F word. And while his drivers were wrecking the cars on the grid and causing millions of dollars of damage without scoring any points, the fans found glory in Günther's vocabulary and his way of dealing with things. On top of that, Formula 1 and the FIA are yet to address the issue that they are racing in countries in which the human rights are under a huge question mark. But when it comes to using the F word, then the double standards and the bias is quite visible. Marko also shares the belief that there are definitely double standards in the sport, and when talking about that to a greater extent, the veteran Austrian said, "Yes, it's not understandable how the F word was so popular for Günther Steiner, and there are definitely double standards. And on top of that, Max didn't mean a person. He meant the car, an object, and he did it in a flippant way. Okay, maybe in an afternoon press conference, if it's all going to be handled so strictly, you'll just take a different approach in the future, but it's clearly over the top." Leclerc has gone on to criticise the FIA by saying that while this is an important thing to deal with, the governing body seems to be neglecting a very important fact. The drivers are going at speeds of over 300 kilometers an hour, navigating navigating themselves through narrow walls, and the last thing that you would expect for them to watch is their language. The situation is obviously taking a direction that the president, Ben Sulayem, hadn't believed it would when it first emerged, but nevertheless, now he has to deal with all of the consequences his actions have created, which he believes is a bit exaggerated thanks to the British media. And even the president of the GPDA, Alex Wirtz, hasn't shied away of taking a direct hit towards Ben Sulayem and the FIA, saying that the body will hold a private meeting in which the latest turn of events will be the primary subject of discussion, and they will come with a proposal to the FIA as to how to find a common ground in which the drivers will still continue to feel comfortable in their cars and not hold back their emotions. When talking about this, Wirtz has stated the same argument as Helmut Marko regarding the Günther Steiner situation. He added, "One of the questions that comes to mind often is how many lifetimes would Steiner have to do community service?" And he was glorified with his F word in Netflix, which is broadcast worldwide. So in that respect, you ask yourself, what is really the message? What is behind it? And that is simply too harsh a punishment. I have to say, the choice of words is not my personal taste as a driver. As GPDA chairman, I have to officially say that we will, of course, discuss it internally, first reach a full consensus, and then we will consider whether and in what form we will talk to the FIA and the president. Regardless of this, the situation is now more than serious, as Verstappen has stated on many occasions that he doesn't see himself racing in his 40s. But what is good news for the Dutchman's future in Red Bull, as well as the Austrian team themselves, is that the three-time world champion now believes that there is a definitely better time coming in the last 6 races, with 3 sprint races involved as well. The low point of Monza, according to Verstappen, has been finally overcome, and the remainder of the season should go much better, with the first step forward to be taken in Austin, with brand new upgrades in the form of a more flexible front wing and new floor, which should put Red Bull in a bit more of a competitive situation. All Verstappen needs to do to secure his championship until the end of this year is to not finish lower than second, regardless of Norris' position, which, given the pressures he's had to deal with back in 2021, doesn't seem like too hard of a challenge. When talking about the current situation in the team, Max Verstappen said, "Yes, the car now feels better after the Singapore GP. That was already a good step for us. I do think we are moving in the right direction now, but it will take some time. You can't turn something like this around in 1 or 2 weeks, but I do think the team was happy with what they saw in Baku as well." With all this in mind, the situation in Red Bull is going to be very interesting, because they do have a lot to deal with their car as well, and they won't have the greatest amount of time to do so in Austin, as they will only have 1 hour of free practice before they enter the sprint qualifying session. Obviously, with 2 triple headers coming our way, it will be the tightest schedule ever, and it will show whether Verstappen is ready for retirement or maybe a venture into a new team such as Aston Martin. What is your take, and do you think that Verstappen could legitimately retire if the shenanigans with the FIA continue the way they have been? Let us know in the comments below, and once you do that, have a look at the video that's appearing on your screen right now.